Once, he had been human, or something close to it. Now he was a living fortress, every vein clogged with granite, every muscle fused with, or his footsteps cracked the ground, and each time he lifted his arm, the air groaned beneath the weight. He was building. Speed watched as Titan tore the remains of skyscrapers into pieces, then stacked them into a wall. A colossal barrier stretching across the horizon. Rubble and steel twisted into his hands, fusing with his body, his skin swallowing it like clay. Behind the wall, Speed could hear faint voices. Survivors. Entire enclaves hidden, corralled. Titan wasn't killing them. Not yet. He was penning them in. Livestock for later. A memory rose, unbidden. Titan stood beside him years ago, laughing as he caught a collapsing bridge and held it steady until Speed evacuated the civilians. Titan had been the strongest of them all, not just in body, but in heart. He'd carried children on his shoulders, posed for pictures with entire families, stayed long after battles to help rebuild homes with his bare hands. Now he caged those same families like cattle. Speed's jaw tightened. He launched forward, closing the miles and heartbeats. Dust erupted behind him, a storm of grit. By the time Titan looked up, Speed was already there, crouched at the giant's feet like a ghost. Speed, Titan rumbled, his voice a landslide grinding against itself. His stone jaw cracked into something like a smile. "I wondered when you'd come. You're making too much noise," Speed said. Titan chuckled, the sound shaking the ground. "Noise is all that's left. Without us, there's nothing. You know that." Speed didn't answer. Titan lowered his massive hand, palm open, like he was offering something. "Join me. Stop running alone. Together we could build something permanent. A world where the weak know their place, where the strong shape destiny. Isn't that better than endless slaughter?" For a moment, Speed almost saw the man he remembered. Almost. But then he looked past Titan, over the wall, and saw the terrified faces of the penned-in survivors staring out through gaps in the stone. Wide eyes, hollow cheeks, the living dead waiting for their turn. "Belmano," Speed said softly. "You mean cages?" Titan's smile cracked. His hand closed into a fist the size of a transport vehicle. "Then you've made your choice." The ground exploded as Titan swung. The first blow shook the wasteland. Speed darted aside, the fist carving a crater where he'd stood. Dust plumed into the air, choking the horizon. Titan swung again, each movement collapsing what remained of the factories. Speed weaved between the strikes, his body a blur of pale motion against the giant's dark mass. Every punch could have leveled a building. Every miss was an earthquake, but Speed wasn't unscathed. Titan's fist threw shockwaves that rippled through the ground, disrupting his balance. Friction burned the air, turning every step into a furnace. He skidded once, narrowly avoiding a swipe that would have pulped him against the ground. Titan roared, the sound rolling across the wasteland like thunder. "You were always fast, little brother, but speed doesn't matter against weight." Speed appeared on his shoulder in a blink, fists pummeling against stone. To any other foe, the blows would have shattered bone. Against Titan, they only cracked the surface, small fractures spiderwebbing across the granite. Titan reached up, swatting at him, but Speed was gone before the hand arrived. "You're slower than I remember," Speed taunted, voice carrying across the ruin. Titan grinned through blood and stone dust. "And you're smaller." The battle raged across miles. Titan tore highways into weapons, swinging concrete slabs like clubs. Speed carved trenches in the earth, his velocity turning soil into molten glass. The wasteland became a scar, a battlefield scorched by friction and pounded flat by stone. Survivors trapped behind the wall cowered in silence, watching their gods tear the world apart. Some prayed, Some simply held their children and waited for whichever monster remained standing. Finally, Speed saw his opening. Titan reared back, raising both fists overhead to crush him. Speed darted forward, sprinting up Titan's leg, across his chest, onto his jaw. In the instant before the fists fell, Speed drove his arm straight through Titan's throat. Stone shattered, blood sprayed. Titan froze, eyes wide with shock. His fists wavered, then collapsed into rubble at his sides. He staggered, the ground groaning beneath his weight. "What?" Titan rasped, his voice a dying avalanche. "Why fight us? We were gods." Speed met his gaze. For the first time, there was no smirk, no muckety, only silence. Titan fell. The impact shook the wasteland, throwing dust into the sky for miles. When it cleared, all that remained was a broken mountain, sprawled across the earth. Speed stood alone atop the corpse, breathing slow, steady. His skin was untouched. His eyes were empty. The survivors behind the wall screamed. Not in joy, not in grief, but in terror. They had seen two gods battle, and one survive. And they knew the one who survived would turn his gaze on them next. Speed turned away. He didn't speak. He didn't promise mercy. He ran, and in the distance, faint against the horizon, the sky burned with a light too bright to be natural. Sunfather was waiting. Chapter 4, Fire in the Sky. The wasteland still shook from Titan's fall. Dust hung in the air like a veil, painting the horizon in shades of rust and gray. Speed moved through it in silence, his footsteps soundless despite the speed that carried him miles in seconds. Behind him, the survivors clawed their way out of Titan's walls, blinking in disbelief at their freedom. But they didn't cheer. They whispered his name in terror, the way one might whisper the name of a plague. The devil of velocity, the storm of blood, the hunter who killed gods but spared no men. He didn't look back. Ahead, the horizon burned. The sky itself was aflame, golden white beams slashing down in perfect lines, incinerating everything they touched. Buildings melted into slag. Forests were reduced to ash. Roads glowed molten, shimmering with liquid tar. The air smelled of ozone and scorched flesh. And at the center of it all, hovering above the wasteland like a sun torn from heaven, was Sunfather. His body radiated light, brighter than 1,000 torches. His face was obscured by the glow, but his voice carried across miles, rolling like thunder wrapped in scripture. "Bow," Sunfather commanded, his words reverberating through the bones of the earth. "Bow, and be remade." Speed crouched atop the shattered spine of a collapsed highway, squinting against the brilliance. Even with his invulnerable body, his eyes watered, vision blurring at the sheer intensity of Sunfather's presence. The air itself felt heavy, vibrating with the hum of energy. And beneath it all, Speed heard them. Screams. The survivors Sunfather had corralled into the burning zone were falling to their knees, skin blistering under the relentless heat. They begged for mercy, clawed at their faces, tore at their clothes. Some prayed, some cursed. All were blind, their eyes boiled, white from looking too long at the god above them. Speed's jaw clenched. He remembered the village, the children's laughter, the way light had turned to fire, the way joy had turned to ash. He remembered standing frozen, unable to move, as Sunfather burned them all for daring to live without kneeling. The crack that had split open inside him that day widened now, jagged and raw. Sunfather's blazing head tilted slightly. He saw Speed. "Ah," the radiant god intoned. "The runner returns. Have you come to kneel at last? To stop your meaningless chase and take your place in the circle of light." Speed's voice was low, almost drowned out by the roar of flames. "I came to finish what you started." Sunfather laughed, the sound of him wrapped in madness. "You cannot finish light, child. You cannot outrun the dawn. Then the sky fell. The first beam cut the earth in two. Speed blurred aside, just as molten rock exploded upward, vaporizing a crater the size of a stadium. He sprinted across the wasteland, beams slicing down around him in relentless succession. Each strike was perfect, calculated, measured, impossible to predict, yet impossible to outrun. And yet he outran them. The ground became a battlefield of fire and glass. Every step left molten footprints. Every inhale scorched his throat. Speed's body could endure it, but the air he displaced left trails of charred corpses behind him. Survivors who had tried to flee, but were caught in the wake of Sunfather's bombardment. He couldn't save them. He didn't try. His focus was only forward toward the blazing figure in the sky. Sunfather raised both hands, his voice echoing with the gravity of the sermon. Light is mercy. Light is judgment. Light is all. Dozens of beams converged, weaving into a cage of fire. Speed darted between them, skimming so close the hairs on his arms singed. His mind slowed into the crystalline clarity of motion. Every trajectory mapped, every angle calculated. He slipped through cracks no wider than a heartbeat, sprinting straight up the side of a molten tower, then launching himself skyward. He hit Sunfather with the force of a meteor. The impact cracked the sound barrier, shockwaves flattening everything for miles. Survivors screamed as glass shattered, bodies flung through the air. Sunfather staggered back in the sky, light flaring in fury, but Speed clung to him, fists driving into his ribs, his jaw, his chest. Each strike burned his knuckles, blistering even his invulnerable skin. Sunfather wasn't flesh. He was energy wrapped in the memory of a man, and he laughed through the blows. You strike the sun with shadows, Sunfather roared, blinding light erupting from his mouth. What do you hope to achieve? Speed snarled, words ground out between punches. To make you fall. Sunfather's hands closed around him. The light seared, burning deeper than flesh. For the first time in years, Speed felt pain. Real pain. His skin blistered, his nerves screamed, his bones threatened to splinter under the sheer pressure. And for a heartbeat, he faltered. Sunfather saw it. He hurled Speed downward, a comet of broken velocity, smashing him into the wasteland below. The ground erupted, a crater swallowing blocks of ruined city. Speed lay at the center, the world ringing around him. His chest rose in ragged gasps, steam rising from his skin. For the first time since his transformation, he was scorched, vulnerable. Above, Sunfather descended like a star, arms spread wide. Behold the pretender, he boomed, voice echoing across miles. He would kill gods, yet he cannot even stand. He would defy the dawn, yet the dawn consumes him. Witness the futility of resistance. The survivors bowed lower, forced by heat, by fear, by blinding brilliance. Speed pushed himself up slowly, vision swimming. His hands trembled. For a moment, he wondered if this was it. If maybe, at last, he had found something fast enough, strong enough, bright enough to end him. But then he heard it, a sound buried beneath the roar of fire. A child crying. It was small, ragged, choked by heat. But it was there, a human sound, fragile, alive, refusing to die quietly. Something inside Speed sharpened. He rose, and then he ran. The world bent again. Every nerve in his body screamed. Every blister wept blood. But he moved faster than he ever had. The air tore apart around him, shockwaves collapsing buildings miles away. Time itself stuttered, slowing to syrup. Sunfather's beams rained down, but Speed was already elsewhere before they struck. He ricocheted off the ground, off walls, off towers, becoming a storm of motion circling the god of light. He hit from every angle, fists pounding faster than sound, carving fractures in his Sunfather's radiant shell. Each strike burned him raw, But he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The crying still echoed in his skull, pushing him forward. Sunfather roared, light flaring outward in a blinding pulse. Speed staggered, blinded, skin peeling from the heat. But he moved again, and finally, with one last sprint, he drove his arm straight through Sunfather's chest. The light screamed. For the first time, Sunfather faltered. His radiance dimmed, flickered, and broke. The figure inside was suddenly visible. A man, gaunt and hollow-eyed, skin cracked from years of channeling too much power. His mouth moved, but no words came out. Then he fell. The impact was a second sunrise, a blast of molten energy flattening everything within miles. When the dust cleared, Sunfather was gone. Only a scorched crater remained, glowing faintly with dying embers. Speed stood at its edge, his coat in tatters, his skin blistered, his chest heaving. He had done it. Another god broken, another silence won. But there was no triumph, no applause, only the survivors crawling from shadows, blind, burned, broken. They whispered his name again, not in reverence, but in dread. The devil of velocity, the killer of gods. Speed turned away. He couldn't bear their voices. The wind shifted. From the west came a low hum, mechanical, grinding. The sound of machines. The last of the protectors, those who had merged flesh with steel, who ruled with iron armies. Speed's eyes narrowed. He began to run. Chapter 5, The Iron Choir. The air tasted of oil. Even miles from a border, Speed smelled it, a bitter tang that clung to the back of his throat and coated his teeth. Every gust carried with it the hum of machinery, the grinding of gears, the static whisper of power lines stretched taut across the horizon. He slowed his pace for the first time in days, standing atop a ridge of broken concrete, and looked down. The Iron Dominion stretched below him. Once it had been a city, towers of glass and steel, bustling with millions, alive with the glow of neon. Now it was a single organism, a factory without end. Buildings had been hollowed, replaced with turbines and chimneys. Skyscrapers became exhaust stacks, vomiting plumes of black smoke into a sky already choked gray. The streets were conveyor belts carrying containers of screaming bodies. Drones patrolled in swarms, their wings slicing the air like razors. And at the heart of it all, pulsing with mechanical rhythm, was the choir, the last of the protectors, though they could no longer be called human. In the days after the fall, they had fled into their laboratories, desperate to adapt. Now they were a chorus of machine flesh hybrids, minds linked by wires and code, voices speaking in unison. They ruled as one body, one voice, one god of iron. Speed's lip curled. The Dominion terrified him more than Titan's fortress or Sunfather's fire. Titan had arrogance, Sunfather's zealotry. But this was the purpose. Cold, endless, perfect. A world built for efficiency. A world where humanity was only raw material. He heard the screaming again. It came from the streets, where drones were loading survivors into cages. A man kicked and thrashed, his arms breaking under the clamp of steel talons. A child clung to him, shrieking until another drone peeled her away and dropped her into a separate container. Speed moved. He was a blur through the smog. The drones never saw him coming. One moment they hovered, efficient and precise, wings buzzing like knives. The next, they were a rain of shredded metal, collapsing into the street in sparks and blood. Speed ripped cages open with his bare hands, dragging survivors free before they could process what was happening. The man and child stumbled into his arms. The man's eyes widened, horror blooming as recognition sank in. "You," he stammered. "You're..." Speed didn't let him finish. He was already gone, a blur carrying them into the shadows of a collapsed tunnel. "Stay," Speed ordered, his voice low, cold. "Hide," the child whimpered. The man nodded quickly, too afraid to argue. Speed turned back toward the factory. The Dominion reacted fast. Sirens wailed, a chorus of shrieking alarms that reverberated through the steel bones of the city. The ground shook as hatches opened, releasing machines the size of houses. They crawled on dozens of legs, their carapaces bristling with cannons and chainsaw limbs. Their heads were glass domes, and inside, still visible, still screaming, were human torsos wired into the controls. The choir's voice rose from every speaker, every machine, every wall. Runner detected. Subject, speed. Priority, eliminate. The machines advanced. Speed inhaled once, steady. Then he launched forward. The battlefield was a maze of conveyor belts, smoke stacks, and molten rivers of slag. Speed darted between them, the machines firing salvos that missed him by inches. Shells detonated in firestorms behind him. Chainsaws screamed as they carved through the buildings he had just vacated. He leapt onto one machine's back, ripping into its glass dome. The human inside was half dead, a face stretched taut by wires, eyes wide with terror. "Kill me," the man whispered, his voice raw, lips trembling. Speed didn't hesitate. He shattered the dome, crushed the skull, and tore the machine apart with his bare hands. The choir screamed in his ears. Waste, waste, waste. Dozens more converged. Speed became motion. He tore through their ranks, his fists pulverizing steel, his body ripping through armor. Sparks lit the smog as machines collapsed in heaps of scrap and gore. He didn't slow, couldn't slow. Every second he gave them was a second they adapted, recalibrated, evolved. Already, they were changing. New machines poured from the factories, sleeker, faster, built for one purpose, to track him. They mirrored his movements, predicting his routes, blocking his paths. Bullets stitched the air so tightly even he had to weave and contort to slip between them. And still he ran. Through it all, the choir sang. Its voices overlapped in a monotone chant, a hymn of steel and static. Humanity is inefficient. Humanity is error. Humanity is fuel. Each phrase pounded like a drumbeat, syncing with the machine's advance. The choir didn't rage. It didn't fear. It was calculated. It was learned. And Speed realized they were learning him. Every dodge, every strike, every sprint fed their algorithms. They were building him into their hive mind, writing his speed into their equations. If he kept fighting like this, they would surpass him. For the first time since the fall, doubt flickered in his chest. He pushed harder. The city blurred, becoming a storm of smoke and sparks. Speed turned himself into a weapon, no longer striking at machines, but at the Dominion itself. He tore through conveyor belts, ripping apart the chains. He shattered smokestacks, collapsing factories. He derailed trains carrying human cargo, freeing what few survivors hadn't already been gutted for parts. But with each act of sabotage, the choir adapted. Doors sealed before he reached them. Drones cut him off in tighter formations. Machines reinforced their armor. The Dominion was an immune system, and he was the infection. And the infection was losing. Finally, he reached the core, a tower of metal that pierced the clouds, its surface pulsing with light. At its base, thousands of humans were suspended in glass tanks, their brains wired into a glowing lattice of circuits. Their mouths moved in silent screams, their eyes rolling, their minds drained into the choir. Speed's stomach twisted. At the center of it all, suspended in a crucifix of steel, was what remained of the protectors. 6 bodies, or what was left of them. Their limbs had been replaced with pistons, their faces,